Hello there everybody and welcome to a new build for Age of Wonders 4. This one is a real special one. It's for the Barbarians and it's a Druid build that focuses on summons and plant type units until it culminates into turning us all into plants, and it's a pretty wild and fun thing to play. It's also a build that has been kind of like wishlisted by you, so feel free to drop me into the comment section if you have other ideas that you want to see play tested and turned into a guide here. Of course, has been playtested on brutal difficulty and has been stomping pretty hard, so let's get right into what we got there. So, all culture. We got only one trait here that I see as a must-have, and that's Hideous Stench. It's a really cool one. Several reasons. We go for a synergy with the Alchemy Tome, so it's powerful as it is, but the Barbarian culture has stunning tier 1 people, and this makes everybody more susceptible to that stun damage. Also, it lowers the magic resistance, so the elemental parts of your damage will be hidden harder. It's all in all a really powerful trait, and I enjoy it thoroughly. Poisonous was something that I experimented around with. It's not as powerful as I thought it would be. Go for Overwhelmed Tactics, Sneaky, or the one that increases your accuracy that I constantly forget the name of. These three I see as the most potent picks, but I dominated the game also with just poisonous, stinky lizards. The poisonous trait is sort of interesting, as we do have a lot of people that just stand in front and get smacked, but since we don't have a high tier defensive unit, I kind of like miscalculated myself with that one. Overwhelmed Tactics and Sneaky are really good for this build. So, cultural. We're going to go for mana channelers. That's my must-have trait here, simply because the summoning cost reduction is so good for you to have. It allows you to spam units in the early game, and it allows you to just don't care about your losses at many points of the game, because you will just print out a new unit, and this is mostly due to this trait. 50% reduction on summoning spells is wild. It's really powerful. Also, it makes your magic origin units slightly bit more powerful, but it's really about this line here. And the other one, Devious Watchers. It is a really good pick on the Barbarian culture, because hear me out why. Barbarians have scouts that can found cities. Therefore, starting with an extra scout unit and having Wayfinder enchantment right from the get-go is amazing. But not only does this sound already pretty nice, the extra vision range of the cities and provinces is nice to have. The universal camouflage and the watchtower upgrade on the outposts, though, wow. That's just so much synergy with the Barbarians that I really enjoyed this pick a lot. So, feel free to swap out Devious Watchers for whatever feels like a better choice for you. Several nature traits came to mind for me, as well as runesmiths. Even something like Prolific Swarmers would be quite nice. Ritual Cannibals, there are so many good traits to pick. I just wanted to feature Devious Watchers because I feel like it's a real good pick for the Barbarians, especially since it opens up a bit of the shadow affinity. The 3 points are from a hero, don't mind that. You normally get only one, but it's enough for the knowledge extraction skill, and it's just that good only because of that. My humble opinion. So, let's get into the tomes. We go for a very nature-heavy build, but that is pretty easy to anticipate. We go for Tome of Roots as the very first one. It offers pretty much everything you might want to have for the start. A healing spell, which is really good since we are quite squishy early on. Vine Prison acts as an amazing decoy tool. Basically, whenever something is about to die on the battlefield that isn't supposed to die, put a Vine Prison in. If there is some bloat of enemies ahead of you that just don't want to engage, put a Vine Prison between you and the enemy lines and watch them kill this stuff all of a sudden. It's a very multifunctional spell, and I love it for what it does. Blight Blades and Poison Arrows are not much to say about. They're just really good at what they do. And the Entwined Thrall is a real power player in this game. We got tier 1 racial skirmishers, but these guys are in my opinion, even a little bit better than all racial ones because two reasons. First off, they do mixed damage. That's pretty good since we go into alchemy later down the road, but also they transform into entwined protectors if they happen to survive long enough, which are just massively useful. So, unlike your native skirmishes, these guys turn out into something really useful at the end of their career. So it's up to you, but I like them, and they're really, really cheap to spam. The Herbalist Province Improvement is really cool. It gives you a conduit that you can build, it gives you a bit more mana, a bit more city growth, and a bit more regeneration. It's pretty cool to have, especially since you can fulfill conduit quests or whatnot quite easily. Second tome I picked up is the Tome of Alchemy. There's so much good in it, but the major sales point of it is, surprisingly enough, Anti-Magic Tincture and Mysterious Tonic, because it is a powerhouse in negative status control. And I discovered that stuff like Decay, Burning, and all these things can really destroy your build quite easily. This gives you resilience against that. But of course, that's not the only point. Afflicting Miasma will become a powerhouse over the course of the time in your build because you deal various types of damage. Also, it is an AoE weakening spell, which is really, really cool to have. The Afflictors are really cool ranged units. I like to replace my Furies with them. Nothing bad against the Furies, since they can get frenzied now, they're pretty cool, but the ability to put a glob of miasma somewhere, guaranteed hit, is pretty cool. Weakening and Affliction softens up the enemy quite nicely, and those basic attacks aren't bad, so you get a quite good tier 2 unit out of that. Material refineries help you to boost out more knowledge income, which is one of the weak sides of the barbarian culture, therefore a pretty good thing to have. And fumigation, well, it's a little bit lackluster. I've been experimenting around with it, but it's hardly worth my time. In my humble opinion, it's much more powerful to pick up one of the other research projects in the tome there. The Alchemist's Lab is really cool because, like I said, you are weak on the research side, and that helps you to mitigate that issue quite a lot. So we move now over to the tier 2 tomes. Tome of Glades is the first one that we pick, and it's been a really hard choice because there is also the Tome of Fertility, which would fit into a plant druid build excellent with the nymphs and the animate flora, but I had to opt away from that because we need what's in this book way too much. First and foremostly, Entwined Protectors and Aspect of the Root. Aspect of the Root allows your own tier 1 shield units to be really resilient. They can just heal themselves up for 30 HP, so that means if they start the fight banged up, that's not really much to worry about. They'll just sit down and take a breather and be fine. And the Entwined Protectors are summons and tier 3 shields, and they will give you the resilience that you require to get along in the mid and late game. They are also soft supporters, which is amazing. They can do a burst AoE or point blank AoE heal around themselves once per battle, which turned out for me to be a really powerful thing because often I don't need much more than that. So they are defensive units that have a support side effect, which is really good. And since they inherit the Aspect of the Root skill out of this unit enchantment as well, they're really hard to kill. You have a lot of resilience on these guys, and on the rest of your army as well. So after this, it's much harder to kill your units. And obviously, we want the Glade Runners as well. This build is quite ranged attack heavy, and these guys are a really good synergy into that. Being tier 3 ranged units, their standard attacks hit quite nicely, and the Tracker's Mark is really good at softening up targets that are hard to hit, and Sundered Defense never hurts. It's also a free action, so you can apply it and shoot. No biggie. Quite easy. Leaf Skin, well, it's pretty cool. It gives you Forest Walk, which allows you to use Create Forest afterwards to get an advantage on the terrain while the enemy is at disadvantage. Also, mind you that with Forest Warden, your fighters will become more potent on forest tiles, so this tome also allows you to do terrain warfare. soft one. It's not as devastating as icy terrain or such, but you are heavily in advantage when you max out these traits. So all in all, a massively synergistic tome. I would have loved to pick fertility, but the problem with that would have been, or affinities would have been way too one-sided, and we would have been forced to go into Tome of Vigor. But if you happen to have a hero that gives you 2 extra astral affinity, you can go for fertility as well and skip the Tome of Summoning if you want to. But I wouldn't recommend you to, because it is a surprise hit for this build for me. Let me explain why. First off, I want to introduce Arcane Supercharge to you. All Magic Origin units can be cranked up to the insane levels there. It's a pretty costly spell, mana-wise, also combat casting point-wise, but you got a lot of Magic Origin units already. At this point, we got the Entwined Thralls, which can really hit like a truck if they have that on themselves, or you just casually turn your shield units into some hard-hitting thing that all of a sudden is really not that defensive anymore. This spell's really good. Its only downside is in its massive cost, so use it wisely. The Astral Keeper spell is awesome. It's so good for this build. First off, I want to point out it's a combat summon, so this is a supporter that you can't just whip out whenever you want it. It heals in a 2-hex radius if it dies, and it can also heal somebody and crank up their damage a little bit every once in their lifetime. Their damage is pretty lousy, but the major sales point here is that these guys can be just plopped on the battlefield, attract enemy aggravation, boost or heal your own units, die, and heal your own units again. They are just so good at frontline things and misleading the AI into stupid moves or just pressuring your human enemy into either killing these guys and giving you profit, or just allowing you to heal your units and pelt them with a bit more ranged damage. They're really annoying, especially since they're darned cheap due to the summoning cost reduction that we have. Lovely stuff. We also get the Astral Serpent, which is a massive frontline filler. Whenever your native berserkers die, these guys can fill up the ranks. Also, Shattering Refuge is massive. It allows you to teleport right into the enemy and then be invulnerable for a turn. Yeah, these guys die a lot, but you have at least a unit that you can just toss in and resummon after the combat. And being tier 3, these guys aren't that easy to kill after all. They're a bit weak on the physical side, but their damage output is really nice. Good stuff. And Arcane Restoration, I wouldn't recommend too much on that one, because we don't have that many Magic Origin units. It might be a side pick, and Arcane Bond, it's nice, but it's darned costly. I don't like it for what it does. But, well, it's really cool if it goes off. I'll leave it up to you. I didn't find that too impressive, though. Unlike the Wisp Familiar, you get a free combat summon if you happen to be a battle mage, and summoning well gives you more of that stuff that you need. Also, I want to point out it gives you free combat summons in town defense, which is super good. And it's another conduit. It's more mana, it's more knowledge, and you have already a conduit building tome. It gets better there as we enter the tier 3 realm. And we can pick up Tome of Amplification due to the astral affinities we got there. We got the cultural +1 and this tome +2, allowing us to pick Amplification, which is, with amplified arrows, a massive upgrade for your archers. Don't need to say much about that. It turns your archers into sort of AoE attacks. Frenzying Focus is, well, not that good. You can actually skip it because your supporters won't be playing that much of a role damage profile wise, but Astral Blood is really good. It gives you critical hits whenever you cast spells, and since casting spells in combat is kind of like your second nature with that build, it really, really goes to town. Also, Amplify Minds is again a really good thing. It gives you more knowledge income at the cost of a little bit of city stability, but I keep repeating myself, Barbarians usually lack knowledge. With this build they don't, and that's nice. Chain Lightning is a pretty cool battlefield nuke if you don't have anything better to do, which happens not too often on me, and the Amplification Pylon is therefore, well, these two spells aren't not that good, but the other three here are so good that it pays off. Also, Resonance Fields, another conduit. Or mana, more casting points, making you cast even more in combat. And at the end of this, we go into the Tome of Cycles, which makes you pretty much dominating in every field. We gain Projectiles of Decay, which allows us to inflict decay on the enemy. With the Alchemy Miasma, we have now a wild combination of damage over time effects, which are not that easily cleansed because you cannot heal anymore unless you cleanse the decay. It's really good. It goes on pretty much everybody, and at that point your supporters finally have a worthy attack again. Parting Gifts is super good for this build. Since we have a lot of battlefield summons that disperse after a couple of turns, since we have Vine Prison, since we have just so much that can afford to die, you get so much return out of that, so I can recommend this whenever you have the feeling that you will suffer a lot of damage. Some enemies just burst a lot or cast a lot of damage spells. Parting Gifts counters these strategies profoundly. If you need more of a burst heal, Diffuse Health is a burst damage and heal spell, so you can see here some combination with the Amplification Tome's damage upgrades. Pretty good stuff as well. Cycle of Seasons is a nice to have. I don't know, I think it's pretty good, but it sounds underwhelming on paper, but in practice, whenever you are under the effect of it, it's pretty powerful, since it's all battlefield-wide effects, and they only benefit one person, you, so that's really good. And the Druid of the Cycle gives you finally a supporter which is worth its money, giving you a good attack, giving the ability to burst heal, and giving the ability to massively debuff an enemy and eventually, or maybe, kill them. But take Cycles in mostly as a heavy debuff spell, which that's a lot weakening if everything goes wrong. But of course you can also try to assassinate people. But I had a lot more fun with that spell once I started to perceive it as a massive debuff for somebody, which is not supposed to deal a lot of damage. If I'm super lucky, he even dies. What's not to like about that? Yeah. And tier 4, which is going to be the completion of our build, where you can go wherever you want to go, is Tome of Paradise. Guy has chosen, turning us all into plants, and the other spells here are making us beefier and giving us the ability to flank the entire battlefield. And Nature's Wrath is the other tome to pick up, giving you Nature's Avenger, which allows you to make your support heroes put a +5 strengthening buff at the beginning of your combat or whenever you need it. That's where things go crazy, and the rest of the spells here are just as good. Horn God is like the flagship of your armies, and the rest of the spells, I don't want to explain them too detailed because I think these spells don't need much explanation since they are just that powerful. Okay, let's move over to the military strategy and your roster that you inherit from the Barbarian side. I've been talking a lot already about the Tome units, but let's talk about your native units. Pathfinders will be what they are always for the Barbarians, scouting the world and building outposts where you need them. You can afford to be super expansionistic with these guys, allowing you to leave the city building to the Pathfinders. It's worth the 50 gold more than it costs, and leave your hero just to clear out the monster nests in the vicinity. Always love to do that, but apart from that, these guys don't have that much more things I have to say about them. The Sunderers, like I said, are really good at the beginning of your career, but after that, I personally prefer the nature book skirmishes because of the reasons I explained before. The warriors, though, are always useful for this build because since we have the Hideous Stench trait, we can easily inflict the stun on these guys, so that's pretty good. I did forget one thing about the Sunderers, and I'm very sorry about that. Their ranged attack does inflict Sundered defenses, which is again a status resistance debuffer, so they have something going on for themselves. I'm very sorry. Forgot about that. So, tier 2 units, the Fury is a self-frenzying archer, which is pretty good. Their damage profile is really good due to that, but that's all they have in store for themselves. And compared to the Afflictor, I personally prefer the Afflictors due to the fact that they have just more utility for the same price. But at the same time, I gotta say, if you manage to be playing with a lot of crits, or if you want to trust into your crits, Furies are just better. War Shamans. So these guys are what I like to call a necessary evil. They are just one of the most underwhelming support units in the game, and if you happen to get some of another culture, feel free to exchange them. There's no big thing to be attached to. Their healing spell is fairly good, but it is on a stupidly high cooldown, and it's a full action, so yeah, you get to heal once every time. And their damage isn't too high, they have no particular side value. Their biggest point why you must have a couple of them, though, is that they can go into a warding defense zone, which gives you extra magical resistance, because this is boosting up your resilience against ranged magical attacks so much that I would not recommend under any circumstances to skip out these guys, only because you can heal yourself otherwise. Don't sleep on that. It's very, very important. And the Berserkers are super good. They are your burst damagers. They are hard to kill. They attract enemy fire decently, and they hit like a truck. They should be like 3 on 18 units at least, and it's really worth pumping up a couple of your cities to the point where you can print these guys, because they are just... Sometimes you need to get in the face of something, like you need to pin down battle mages or archers or stuff like that, and that's where berserkers excel at. Better than the skirmishers, because they just are hard to kill, and if the enemy decides to focus them, it's actually always a benefit for you due to their berserker's rage trait giving them steadfast when they go low, at least for one turn. And with all the healing capabilities you have in this build, it's really easy to scrape them back from the brink of death after that. So, really good stuff. And like I said, the Glade Runners, if you can afford them, you should totally spam out a lot of them. And my advice is to go for a mixture of Afflictors and Glade Runners for the utility they provide in comparison to the Furies, where there's just not they're just damage. And the trade-off of the utility that you have on the Furies is not enough damage bonus. They aren't hurting not enough for the utility that I give up. Just my personal opinion. Now, let's move on over to the strategy section. In the early game, try to found a second city as fast as you can with your second scout that you got from your devious scouts trait, or go for your first scout, whatever, but by all means, try to build yourself a second city as fast as you can, because that's where the barbarians excel at. Make that even a third city if you find a really good spot somewhere where you can defend it. On brutal difficulty, though, I advise you don't spread your empire out too wide, because you will suffer a lot from defending it from the infestations. After spreading out your empire, it's all about cranking up the armies and overrunning whatever you can. Your focus should be here in increasing your mana income and your knowledge income at any point wherever you can. Your army rosters should, or could, look like something like that. A hero up front, a shield, a berserker. Here I have 2 shields in that regimen, supporter, and something like that. As you see, I do have in this roster not that many ranged attackers currently. You can mix and match that to your own liking. With the rule of thumb here, the more burst the enemy has, the more frontline units you want to print, and the more, how should I call it, bulk of resilience the enemy features, the more your ranged attacks will hit hard. Basically, your ranged attackers counter frontline, and your frontline counters ranged attackers. That's the gist of it. You should make much and healthy use of your summoning capabilities, and basically whenever something dies, make sure it's going to be something that's easily replaceable. Berserkers are insanely valuable for this build, as they are hard to produce and hard to replace, so take good care of them. Each loss on these hurts, as each loss on the ranged units will hurt. Losses on the shields don't hurt. If you lose any of your shield units, you actually done something right if you won the fight afterwards and nothing except that shield unit died. You can always fill up ranks of Fallen with your summoned units, and you should really capitalize on that strategy. Also, of course, try to keep your unit enchantments up and running and keep the flood of units going. Empire skill-wise, I strongly recommend you to go for all the goodies that you have on the nature side for your expansionary plans. Take whatever you want to make your plan work. I didn't need much in that run. I did opt harder into the Shadow Realm because I had a hero that happened to have this affinity. But I also want to point out that the Astral Path that you unlock during the mid-game is so powerful for this build, as it unlocks many casting point upgrades for you. It unlocks knowledge reduction, yet again, very important for your build, because I want to explain to you the weakness on the Barbarian side lies in the fact that they got on their cities libraries. Yeah, here, the battle ritual side replaces the library, which only has 5 knowledge income. Usually you have a stronger building there, and the Ancestral Seer Hall is also, if I remember correctly, it also has a lower knowledge income than the tier 2 knowledge building on the other cultures. Therefore, it's really good to have these traits here, and of course you can gain mana, like a lot of out of that. And being Barbarian also allows you to go into Call of Chaos. Strongly recommend that. Often you get a really nice unit out of that, and you want to play your early game swarmy. Military engineering is taking a while until it kicks in, especially since it is linked to the alchemy tome, so don't rely too much on it. But after a while, you have the alchemy tome running. It is going to provide really good skills here. You won't be reaching arcane artisans too early, which would be a real powerhouse once you do it, but master masons and military engineering are very helpful for your barbarian playstyle. Astral is a surprisingly effective splice into this build, and strategy-wise, I recommend you to take it easy until you have achieved the 3rd tome. Alchemy and Roots are pretty powerful in combination, but you lack frontline. You're just very squishy, and unless you succeed at keeping a couple of Entwine Thralls alive in the early game and turn them into protectors, you will be very vulnerable with just those tier 1 tomes against serious big battles like free cities, AI enemies. But the moment the Tome of Glades kicks in, all these problems are gone. The moment you have Aspect of Root and Entwine Protector unlocked, your army is good to go and you're ready to stomp. It only gets better after that. This part here is basically gluing your most glaring weakness together, and after that I had little to no problems, especially since units are so easily replaceable with this build. You can easily go for that as you see fit. So I have not much more to say, except for feel free to leave me more ideas. There is another wished for build in the making, a high culture Inquisition Holy Fervor build. Going to have fun with that one once we see for that. So leave a thumbs up, consider subscribing, and feel free to check out the description box. There's a lot of cool stuff there, including, of course, links to Patreon, PayPal, and Buy Me a Coffee, and I'd be really happy if you'd give them a look. And I want to give a special thanks to all of you who already did support the channel this way, and a big thanks to you hanging out on this video even after the ad roll. I appreciate. I hope you have a great time until we meet again.